Good morning, my beloveds. We are here to share a cup of coffee this morning. I have found myself this week feeling more afraid than I anticipated. The threads that I have pulled have been many. And I realized that even when you think you're really good at something, there are moments where you just have to bear it. One of my favorite mugs. I've had this one in my possession probably 30 years, and it has survived several moves. And every time I open the box of kitchen cups, I wonder, is this going to be the time? But it just keeps grinning and bearing it. And I think that's kind of where I am this morning. How about you? I was reading the gospel this morning, trying to prepare my heart for this time of conversation. And I was struck by something really, I think, important and something I had overlooked before. You see, the gospel is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, beginning with the 31st verse, where it says that Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering. And so he started describing and foretelling his death and resurrection. He said all of this quite openly, and then Peter, one of his disciples, pulled him aside and began to rebuke him. I can imagine that place being, Jesus, you can't be dwelling on the negative all of the time. You're going to lose people. People are going to quit wanting to hear what you have to say. You have to be happy and joy-filled, and we just don't talk about these things in public. And it was at that moment that Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, for you're setting your mind not on heavenly things, not on divine things, but on human things." It was nice to remember that Jesus meets us in that place when we are feeling very afraid. I'm looking at the box that stores the Lenten crosses, the Ash Wednesday ashes, and even in those moments when your threads, those frayed edges overflow and the corner is full of ashes, Jesus is with you. These are the threads from all of the burlap crosses that I worked on this year and prayed over and pulled threads from every single one that you received. And I have kept them and I have prayed over them. And this week it seems like my box overflows. This has been a week where I received information that one of our sisters who was widowed this year is overwhelmed in her grief journey. Her grown children are missing their father, and she is missing her husband. And winter, it's just an awful lot to bear. One of our sisters who is on a journey with a debilitating disease where every day is an experience of being slightly less vital, slightly weaker than the day before. One of those weeks where a beloved leader, lifelong leader of our congregation, experienced his beloved wife falling and understanding that he has reached a place in his life where he no longer has the strength to rescue her. He had to call someone in to be able to scoop her up and take her for help. In the midst of all of that, it has been a time that has been, for this wonderful couple, a time when fear was abounding, not knowing what the next step was going to be, not sure what direction all of this would go. There was a time when I was in conversation with him, trying to assure him that he did have strength and he could, from a truth and love-based perspective, say to his dear wife, now is not the time to be fear-filled. Now is the time to embrace being hope-filled. She doesn't need surgery, even though she has broken her hip. And yet the decision to go not to her home, but to spend the next few weeks in rehab here in Malone was frightening and overwhelming. It was a moment of fraying and fretting. And I sat here at home listening and praying and worrying and trying very hard to practice what I preach, remembering that my philosophy changed years ago. I work very hard to remember that I get to be in this place, not that I have to be in this place. And yet this was a fraying week. I was reassured by the gospel message. Even Jesus said it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to acknowledge our humanity and that hard things happen. And we are called on to keep journeying. We mess up. We make mistakes. There are times that I'm facing this camera and I've got my cup of coffee, and I'll be honest, I have no idea what to say. So I just bear it and I move forward. Beloveds, these messages the last few weeks seem to be very similar. I keep coming back to not being afraid. Do not be afraid. Be not afraid. Don't be afraid not. And I know that I offered it in a very tongue-in-cheek way. But honestly, that's where we all are in this moment. I ask that you continue to pray for those who are experiencing the struggles that normally come along in life, those moments where falls are taken. There's ice outside. There are hazards everywhere we look. I myself took an incredibly hard fall yesterday, and as I laid there on the ground, I wondered very much if I be able to stand up again. And yet here I am. Seek hope. Let go of fear. Understand you are not alone. We are journeying in a time that none of us have ever experienced. Much like the disciples when Jesus was preparing himself emotionally and physically for the journey to Jerusalem and the cross. Lent is not just for belly buttons. Oh, wait a minute, that's Lent. Well, Lent is not just for that either. In this time, be centered. Understand that we get to experience this journey. We don't have to. We choose to as disciples of Jesus Christ. We bear our burdens as much as we can. We don't add problems in the midst of challenges. But remember, beloveds, it is okay to say, this is a lot. Jesus will remind you to keep your sight on the divine and not on the earthly. Engage yourself, be in relationship with one another and with God. And we will continue on. You're in my thoughts, you're in my prayers. I miss you so very much. I pray that this time of distancing will be behind us soon. But until then, don't come apart. Be not afraid. Peace be with you, beloveds. I'll talk with you soon.